welcome guys for the second part for the video which we have did for the HTTP API integrations. So in this section, in this part, we will be going to look over the things that will be for creating the separate view component. Like if you can see in the browser, let me show you. So this is what we have did in our part 1 video. So what we did is we will be selecting any of the user from the list here. So that user is been doing what? That user, if I'm clicking on see details from IMA wrong card, so this user listing module, this user listing component will have both of the components like listing and the view one as well, right? So whatever we are doing this, so it will be consuming our single get API. This section will have get all API integrated, and in this section we have single get API, single user API, right? So today in this video we are going to write a separate component for that view, so that once user will be clicking on see details, so user will be navigated to another page which will be view user page. So on that we will be consuming the single gate API, so that will be more feasible and looking pretty good in this sense, and that will be making more clear sense for the users. Like this is what we were practicing in our first video, so in this part we will be going to look after this thing, right? So this is a thing which I have already described now. So let's move to the code part, and we will be looking into the browser simultaneously. So let's see how it will goes. Okay. So now the first thing we have to do is you guys already have a good idea over this thing. So what we are going to do is in this user module, if you can see here in this user module, we are having with user listing component, which we will be which we have to look after the user listing part. And add edit user was the form which we have created. So that form is for adding and updating the user information, right? So now this user directory, if you can go and right click on this directory and select this option, open an integrated terminal. So in this integrated terminal you are going to write what ng generate component for what? View user, view dash user, right? So this is the view part, as I already described. So if you can generate this component now, so this is the component which is being generated here inside the users module. So the second thing you have to do is you have to open that users module and copy this statement, right? And you can go now in users routing module, right? Inside that you should have to paste your copied statement here from line number 12, which is for user component. You have pasted it here, and what you have to do is you have to create a new entry, a new route for what? For view user, right? For view user you have made this routed path under the children of user component. So now after this thing, if you can go into the browser, and if you can see view user, so you can see now this component is being created, view user component, right? So let's look into the coding part now. You can close this module and route module. So now the second thing is you have to do is, let's close this terminal as well. So now, yeah, so now the thing you have to do is you have to open this listing part 1, right? This listing component, user listing component, And what you have to do is you have to make your this button, which was the success button for C details. So let me show you in the browser. So this C details button, we are going to make this button once user will be clicking on this detail. So earlier we have did is to consume the API, right? But now we are removing that API call for a single user to show up here. But rather than we are doing, if user will click on C detail, so user will be migrated to view user page, this one. So once user will be clicking on this C detail, so user will be route navigated to this page. So let's do this thing. So C details button is here. We have did that. So what we are doing is we will be changing the method name from here. So from get single user thing is like it's representing the API call. So let's move with it view user, we can say. Okay, view user, and it's containing what? Item.id. So let's write the navigation part there in the new method, and we are going to override the name of this method, which is get single user, right? So we are going to override this method with view user, right? And we are removing this API integration from here, not from this listing part, but only for the single gate API, right? So we have removed that part. Now we are going to do a navigation part. So in the navigation part, Angular has its router module. So whenever you are going to write the navigation in your Angular, so you are going to import this router part, right? Import router from @angular/router. You are going to import this statement here in the import section, and after that you have to do is to create a constructor for that. You can write private router, this thing, right? So inside this constructor, after writing this, now let's once user will be clicking on this C details button, so this view user method will be integrated, will be initiated, and inside that what parameter it's been taking is whatever the card user is clicking on, so that ID will be coming up here, right? And the type of that ID is number. So now once the ID is coming up here, so what we are going to do is once a user will be clicking on this C details button, so user will be navigated to this page, view user. But the extra thing we are going to do is that navigation part is sending the ID with the navigation as well. Like if I'm clicking on Ima Wong, as take an example, like assume that if I'm clicking on the C details button, so what it will be doing, it will be taking the ID of Ima, and that ID will be coming up on this view. So we are going to do this thing. So once the ID will be on this page, then after the second step is we are going to integrate the API for get single user, which we were doing in our previous part, right? So let's do this part. So the first thing I have to do is to take this ID is coming up here in the method when user will be clicking on the C details. So ID is coming up here. So I am navigating to the page of view user with the ID. So I am sending the ID from listing page to view user. So in this manner, I have to call this constructor here, this dot router, right? This dot router dot navigate. This is a method. So inside that navigation part, I have to pass two things. One thing is the navigated route, like on which route user will be going to navigate it. So user and what let me go into the user routing module. So this is a path which I have created under the users module. So inside the users, I have to go on view user. So once user will be clicking on see details, so user will be navigated to this page, right? So let's test this thing, either this is working or not. So if we are going to on this page, and if I'm listing this one, so if I'm clicking on, you can see, if I'm clicking on see details, so user is being navigated to view user component now. So it has been successfully done, but this is partially done, this is half done. Why? Because I am unable to integrate the API for get single user here, because get single API always require the ID. If you can see in the service part, so let me show you the service part here. So get user is taking an ID to the endpoint, if you can see. So now I have to pass that ID from listing component to view user component. So for that purpose, router.navigate has a capability for passing the extra data to your navigated component. So that thing will be passed using queryParams. So in here, queryParams is the object, so you can pass the whole object here. So inside that object, what I'm going to pass is the data. So now at this step, what's the data for me? The data is ID, right? So now I have to pass this ID. So now the key name is ID and the value is ID. So both are looking same. So we have to change this ID with underscore ID. So this manner we are going to differentiate these two things. So this is ID key, and this is the value. That value is coming from view user method from which we are calling. So now let's understand this from HTML part. So inside the HTML, there was a button for see details. So earlier we were doing the API call for get single user. Once user will be clicking on that, so data the API call was initiating, and that's been getting the data for that user from API. So but now we have changed this to the way like view user. So view user method is been taking the parameter of ID of that user. So we are doing what? We are navigating the application to this route, view user route, and we are passing the data, we are passing the ID to that view user component. So this is what we are doing. So let's check the impact over the browser. So if you can see, if I'm clicking on Eve Halt, so Eve Halt is coming with this ID. If you can see in the address bar, so user/view user, this is the component routing. So component is being routed successfully, but it's been coming up with this data. If you can see, ID equal to 4. So this is the ID which we are sending from listing component to view user component, right? So now this routing part is successfully done. So the second part is to integrate the API, right? So now let's see. So inside this, what we are going to do is we are going to now from user listing page we are sending this ID, right? But inside the view user component, we have to receive that ID which is coming in our address bar. So for that purpose, we are going to again import this router module in our view user component, right? So remember view user component, this one, the new component we have created. So if you can see, we are sending the ID from listing to view user component, but here we have to catch this ID from address bar. We have to catch this ID from query parameters or from activated route, right? So we have to do this. We have to receive this ID from activated route. So once we will be receiving this ID, then after we will be successfully calling the get user API. So not route, but we are going to use this with activated route. So we have to create a constructor private route, this one, activated route, right? So now in our ng-on-init component, we have to write a method receive params. We are going to write this method, right? So the main purpose of creating this method is to catch the data which is coming from our which is coming from our main node, like which is coming from our listing component. So this dot route dot again, the data which is the data is coming inside the query parameters, right? Query params dot subscribe, right? Params is our arrow function, a callback, and inside this what we have to do is we have to do the API call for get single user. So now we are going to perform that. So here in this manner we have received the parameters. So now here if we can do a console log of this parameter, so you guys have a clear picture, like on this view user new created component, on this we will be going to receive these parameters which are coming from the listing component. So let's initiate this method on ng-on-init lifecycle method. So once user will be navigated from listing component to the view user component, so this method will be going to initiate first before ng-on-init will be going to initiate it after this template is attached to the DOM. So that method will be going to hit that receive parameters. And what this receive parameters is doing, receive parameters is catching the parameters which we have passed from our listing component. So let's see the impact in the browser so you guys can get a clear picture, right? So here if I'm opening the DevTools console, so if you can see here, what we are doing is we are, if I will be clicking on see details, so you can see this ID is passed using what? Using the router query parameters, as we have written the view user method in our listing component. But in the console, in the DevTools, if you can see, this object is coming. So this object is coming from where? View user component. So see, this is how we are catching the ID. This ID is passed from our listing component using the router strategy, and this is how in our console.log, if you remember, I have shown you this one. So with this manner we are receiving that ID in our parameters in our console log. So now in our view user component we are going to do that API call. So let's do that thing. So for that thing I have to use that user service import, because the API integrations was written there. So I have to also copy this constructor from here, okay, in the view user. So now let's initiate the API call now. So I will be going to write the API call here. We can say get single user, right? So this will be going to take ID is having with the type of number, right? So here we are going to write our API call. So this dot users is the constructor for my service, inside which I have written the API call. So here you can find get user after the endpoint. So this method will be going to receive an ID which we are passing from here. So dot subscribe response is our callback. So here what I have to do is whatever the data I am getting, so I have to create a variable with the type of any having with empty object for now. So let's catch the data which is coming from API here in the user part. So I can rather say this dot user equal to response, right? And now I'm doing the log here, this dot user, right, to see like how I'm getting the API call from here. And don't forget to call that method inside this receive parameters method. So I'm again repeating, from our listing component we have did this routing part. So this routing part is doing what? A card listing component. This is user listing one. So once user will be clicking on any of the cards, so this listing page will be navigated to the view user page with this specific data, this ID, right? So this is the first thing we have did. The second thing was we are catching that ID. We are catching this ID which is coming from listing component. So we are catching this ID in this view user component here by created our new method, say receive params, right? So this looks clean. So this is, I'm following the separation of concerns. So I'm actually breaking out my component in the functional parts. So this receive parameters is doing what? It's been receiving the parameters which will be passing from our listing component. So once the ID came here successfully, I have to call that API method which I have been written below, this one, get single user. So I'm calling this method here by passing the ID. So if you remember in which name you are receiving this ID, with the key ID. So I'm going to pass this params. I say params is what? This is a callback method. So I'm passing this params.id here, right? So in this manner I'm successfully been initiating the API call. So the first thing is we have navigated this component with ID from listing component. Second thing, we are receiving this ID from query parameters, from our routing part. So the third thing we have did is, once it's been successfully get, so we are consuming the get single user API by calling it here inside the success call. So we are passing this ID, and that ID is being passed to our get user method inside our API call service. So that's been getting the data, and that data is being populated in this user variable or user object, we can say. So let's see the impact in the browser here. So if you can see, if I'm cleaning this one, so if you can click on George Blood, so if you can see, this API is being called, and the data is being served on view user component. If you can see, this is a view user component, right? So view user component, line number 32, you are receiving the data now, right? So this was the important thing. So we have covered that aspect as well, and now we are going to we have to render that method. So what we have did is, earlier, this is a listing component. So if you can see on the browser, if you are clicking the see details, so that data, that card were receiving here, this place. So what we are doing is we are getting this view from here, and we are using this inside this view user one, right? Format selection. So we have did nothing. We have just copied our HTML part from here, and to look cleaner, what we have going to do is we are going to close this call tree method, right, and delete these two things. So those two closing divs. So what I have to do is I have to simply copy this call tree statement from here, and remove these two things, call 7 till. So inside this row I only have these call tree, right? So it's been pretty specific, and it's been copied out here. So if we are going to see on the browser, you can see now how it look like, right? So this is pretty straightforward. Now this listing part is only with listing. So if you can click on any of the details, so that user details, this ID is being passed, and we have cached this ID in our view user component TypeScript file, and then we are getting the data from API. So if I'm clicking on George Blood, so you can see the George Blood API is being called. So inside the tab tools, if I'm enlarging this screen, so inside your network tab, now you can realize, so this is a listing API and the data is being coming inside this all of the users. So let's clear this one. So if I'm clicking on George Bluth, so if you can see, this data is being called using API, and this data is being passed on this view user component inside the console. You can also see, so this data is being rendered here, right? So this is how we have covered this. We have covered this pretty specific part. So we have moved our view user component with a separate component. So if you are clicking on see details, so but how this this is not pretty good. So you can customize your HTML part with your needs, whatever you want. So you can upgrade, or you can change the view part, how it looks like, or that should be more specific. So with that, you can use that. So I have written down one thing here. So let me do this part as well. I'm copying this from the testing part. So I have added this heading part. So let me show you how it will look like. So this is what it looked like. So if you can click on Ima Wong, so Ima Wong is being on you, like it says you are on user details page, and this is the details for that user. So if you can click on back, you can again go and see the details with new user. So anything you want, right? So this is pretty much, and we have been covered. We have been fixed the view user component separately. So in the master branch of that code repository, which I have been shared in my YouTube description, so you can tag this updated code from there. I can say edit view user with queryParams route, right? So with these changes, with these thing, I am pushing this code. So you can tag that updated source code from the repository. I have already shared that repository in the description of YouTube, so you guys can take a look on it, right? So this is pretty much what we have cleared, what we have covered today. So hope you guys like this video. So in other session, so another section of another part for this video, I will be going to cover the update and delete. I have already been covered the delete part, right? This delete part. So yeah, so in our upcoming video, what I'm going to do is edit user. So in our upcoming video, what I will be doing an update API call. So we are going to add another button here with see details and delete. We are going to add another button for update user. So once user will be clicking on that update user, so user will be navigated to this form with pre-filled data. So assume that user have clicked on Ima Wong see details, sorry, not see details, but there will be another button for update details. So once user will be clicking on that update details button, so the data for this Ima Wong, this will be pre-populated. Inside this page. Like assume that user will be going to click on update details button. So user will be navigated on this page. Edit user, but whatever the user will be clicked on the update thing, so that user data will be coming and pre-filled in the form here. And there will be another button for update user. So once user will be clicking on updating, like assume that updating any of the last name or email or anything else, and user will be going to click on update button, so the update API call will be consumed. So in our upcoming part, so we are going to cover this thing as well. So with this upcoming video, so we will be 100% covered with the API integration for 4 methods: get all user with this listing part, and this delete user, right, and that view user just we have did. So this is what with these things we will be covering with 4 HTTP verbs: get, post, put, and delete. So this is how. successfully we will be going to cover those aspects. So thank you so much guys, and thank you for watching. So hope you guys will find this video helpful. Don't forget to subscribe and like hit the like button. Thank you.